The following is a special joint presentation from the producers of Constant Wonder and The Lisa Show, two podcasts from BYU Radio. Learn more about these and other great podcasts from BYU Radio online at byuradio.org. And of course, you can find both Constant Wonder and The Lisa Show wherever you get your podcasts.
Every morning, we awake to a world marvelously alive. Where do we encounter awe and wonder in this world? In animals and plants, in deserts on mountains, in forests, ocean and sky, in history, art and science, in human striving and human kindness. Join us as we quest for the awe and wonder of knowing we are part of something infinitely larger than ourselves. Hello, I'm Marcus Smith for Constant Wonder.
And I'm Lisa Valentine Clark of The Lisa Show.
Today we're going to bring you a special edition. This is a joint venture, if you will, between our two podcasts. Basically, we're going to make this tandem kind of thingamajig for a very good reason. It's because of Deborah Farmer Kris. She is the guest that we are welcoming to this episode. Deborah Kris comes equipped with stories and experience and wisdom and gleanings actually from scientific research also about our human quest for awe and wonder. And all of this fits seamlessly with both Constant Wonder, my show, and The Lisa Show, which is Lisa's show.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And as soon as we realized that there was a lot of common ground here, rather than, the two of us arm wrestling over who gets the guest.
We could have done that.
Right? Getting greedy, envious of each other. Because, our offices are actually right next door to each other. So we've really got to be civil to each other. We're invested. I'm invested.
We're sharing today. We're sharing
exactly.
For sure.
So we decided to conduct this interview together.
And I really think it's a no-brainer with this particular guest because her new
absolutely.
book.
It's actually it's playing out much like I think it had to be, because Deborah's new book is titled Raising Awe Seekers: How the Science of Wonder Helps Our Kids Thrive. And if anybody knows our, respective podcasts at all, the relevance to yours, to mine, it's absolutely obvious.
Yeah. And Lisa, both you and I off mic here in the offices, we've had some pretty important conversations about the function of awe in our personal lives. We featured you and your very personal story about the loss of your husband. That was in season 5, and you put such a spotlight on his capacity for awe, how that was even perhaps enhanced in his latter years as well. So there is absolute precedence for you and me together. We're talking about awe and sharing that with our audiences, and that's what we're going to do today with Deborah Farmer Kris. Deborah Farmer Kris is a child development expert, a parent educator, and once again the title of her book, Raising Awe Seekers: How the Science of Wonder Helps Our Kids Thrive. Deborah, welcome so much. It's just great to have you with us.
Thank you for having me.
And I'm just delighted, as I mentioned earlier, to have Lisa with us also. And you're going to be heard on both of our podcasts. And I think that just reaches such a great audience that's going to be appreciative of what you have to offer. I thought I would do an icebreaker along these lines. I'm a hiker, and my hiking buddy and I came down off the Wasatch Mountain Range here in the Rocky Mountains of Utah, and we'd been a long day up in the mountains. And we thought we would stop. It was my hiking buddy's idea. We would stop and visit with, it was his uncle-in-law-to-be, but we stopped and he was a botanist. And we were talking about what we had seen. And I hadn't been aware of the evening primrose. It was brand new to me. And this botanist says, well, come off the porch and I'll show you where it's growing in my yard. He says, not only that, but it's 5 o'clock, the sun's going down. Just hang on, you're going to see this thing open. Well, what I wasn't prepared for was that from the bud to the fully open flower is just a matter of a few seconds. And to that day, I thank Jim Farmer for showing me this whole thing. Yeah, that was because my hiking buddy is connected to Gladys and Jim and your family. And so when I heard about your book, I thought, this is a must-do.
Way to make me cry before I start talking.
I love your reaction and your gasp of pure excitement in this connection.
Because when you were talking about this, I thought this is a story my dad would love. Because, Like in so many ways, my book, which we'll talk about later, is really a love letter to my dad, who passed away before my kids were born. And he was and remains the most curious person I've ever met. Just childlike wonder and delight in everything. Thank you.
Well, he was so gracious to me in showing me something in the way of his attentiveness to the world around him. I mean, I was just brand new with a field guide and wildflowers and trying to identify stuff, just a newcomer to it all.
Yeah.
And I find myself then being tutored, mentored a little bit by someone like him. So anyway, I want to go to your stories with Jim Farmer, your dad.
I have so many Jim Farmer stories. I can't look up at the night sky without thinking about my dad. Here's what you need to know about him, though. This is not a man who was comfortable in a party. He was a scientist. He felt much more at home in a lab than he did, in anything larger than 4 people. And so he was not the most talkative person, but he was very experiential. And so he showed his love so often by showing us what he loved. And so I have this memory of, there were 5 of us, I'm the youngest of 5, and him shaking me awake at 2:00 in the morning. And I stumble outside, and he had laid out blankets and sleeping bags. I think 3 of us arrived. I have a couple siblings that I'm sure were not there. They don't get up in the middle of the night. And I think we were all grumbling, why are we out here? And he's just, look. And it was the Perseid meteor shower in August. And it was just going through the night sky. My body woke up fully because of what I was seeing, and I was watching it. Just recently, we were at the beach, and it was nighttime, and you could see the Milky Way. And I called the kids out. I was like, just look up. And every time I say to my kids, look up, I just feel my dad next to me. Because that was a core memory of being outside and looking up and seeing something bigger than myself. When the world is so kind of overwhelming in the news, I just feel like sometimes just reminding that we're small is actually a really healthy feeling, to just, remind myself that there's a smallness. And one of my siblings just really struggled in adolescence with mental health and other things. And my dad, again, wouldn't be the one to say, let's talk about your feelings. But he would take me and my brother hiking in southern Utah. Any chance he got, he would just drop everything, and we'd go out to these canyons and these expanses. My dad was like, let's get you out. Let's get you into nature. And, let's get you out of whatever funk you're in. And there was something about being able to see so far that I think created that connection and sense of perspective for my brother that he even now credits as getting him through that tough time. I think there's this symbiotic back and forth that I experienced with my dad of I would watch him be fascinated by things. And those things included Greek translations of the Bible and Shakespeare plays and flowers and lichen and trilobites and meteors. And it was just, there was this kind of childlike wonder and this fascination. And I am certain that affected me. But flipping it the other direction, when I started to become interested in things that he didn't know about, he made my interests his interests. One of the stories I tell in the book is, I think I was 3rd or 4th grade, and I went with his students. He was a professor on this. It was a science colloquium, and they always went on this geology field trip. And he took me along. He let me skip school, took me along. And I thought it was super cool. So I was like, I want to be a geologist. And so when we went down to California to visit his mom, he was from LA and he had gone to Caltech. And so he took me to the geology department and introduced me to professors as this 9-year-old.
That's amazing.
But then, of course, a couple years later, when I switched to, for a while, I wanted to be an anthropologist. And he was like, oh, I haven't read much about anthropology. And he went and started checking out all these books, reading Richard Leakey and Margaret Mead, super getting into it. And then I went to go visit one of my cousins and his wife. They were teaching English in Japan. And I went on this mind-blowing trip at age 12, never been on an airplane before. And I'm going all the way to Japan. And I come back and I'm fascinated by Japanese food. And he went again to the library and he got this book, How to Make Sushi. And so he mail ordered for seaweed, right, which you could not buy in the local market. And I think we used canned tuna. I mean, this was not fine sushi, but he figured out how to make sushi because he thought, well, my kid's interested in this. And so it was really that my wonder fed his and his wonder fed mine. And I think that's the way it should go, ideally.
You're living in this family with your dad doing this and your siblings also getting to participate in the hikes and family trips, road trips. I would imagine any single day could have been an opportunity. You probably weren't applying any kind of reflection to the fact that you were experiencing awe. It was just kind of the air you breathed, kind of the water you drank?
Yeah, I think so. And I think there were even moments where I was like, oh, the so-and-so down the street is like a more outgoing, gregarious dad, right? You do that as a kid. You don't always know what
Yeah, you're trying to figure it out
what you have
a little bit.
But I think there was this just, we had so many books in the house. And we would go, there was a museum called the Bean Museum in the town I grew up, and I spent hours there. I remember when Ramses II came through and going and learning all about papyrus, and it was like we had lessons about ancient Egypt at the dining room table. It was perhaps a little quirky, a little outside the ordinary. And I know that's something that I adopted because it was like, even now with my own kids, I know every Celtic stat. I did not know that before my son got really into it because it's just the sense of when you make their interests your interests, it just opens up this really fun world.
Yeah.
Lisa, how does this land with you and when you think about your own childhood? Because we can't listen to Deborah without thinking about how did our childhoods compare?
Oh, yeah. And that collaborative effect of it, you're describing someone very similar to my mother, who was also a school teacher, an artist. And whenever we would show any interest in anything, we went to the library, we went to all the museums, we went to the botanical gardens. And she just was so excited to show us things. I love what you're talking about of this, this wonder that feeds each other. It's interesting now that my mother is still like that. She's like that as a grandmother. When all of her grandchildren were quite young, she would have these art days to come over. Let me show you these art techniques. Let's play with different materials. What are you interested in? Let's draw that. Let's paint that. And it's funny because now her grandchildren are older. They're in their early 20s, most of them. And they still request these art days because it's this chance to explore. And so I love what you're talking about, how it being a collaborative effort. That curiosity, it does feed off of relationships.
This leads into many stories that Deborah has about awe journaling. You had access, I understand, to what your grandmother had written about.
My grandma kept one of those 5-year diaries where you do a line a day. And so literally it was 1 or 2 sentences a day that she would write down. And it started in the 30s before she got married and was a nurse and instructor in Salt Lake City.
Wow.
And then she married a rancher in tiny town, Idaho, 500 people, inherited 2 children. He was a widower, had 5 more of her own, and every day wrote this. I've read the whole thing a couple of times. I'm transfixed by it. Sometimes I'll just go to whatever day it is, like October 3rd, and read her October 3rds for 50 years and just see, moments where she was basically the town midwife because there was nobody with training in the town, right? So some days it was just how many bottles of peaches that she had bottled. Some days who was sick. And I love this. Every single year she recorded the first time the robin came. And I was like, oh, you look for signs of spring too, just like me. I have a fraught relationship with winter. I live in New England. And I thought that just connected me with her. And it also made me realize that my mom, who's also a writer, does tremendous journaling, pages and pages. And even though I write, I'd kind of fallen out of the habit of journaling. And so kind of inspired by my grandmother's, I do 2 or 3 sentences a day. And it's so doable. Often I'll just share them on one of my social medias. Sometimes it's a picture I take and I just do a caption. But now, this year, I've been doing one thing every day, 365 days of wonder. And I can look back in February and be like, oh, I'm so glad I wrote that down. I'll share one of them because I was having a rough February day. It was very cold here. My son had the flu. He was out of school for 2 weeks. It was a really nasty flu. It was a Monday. And so I'm driving to pick up my other kid from school. And I'm like, I haven't found anything awe-inducing or wonder today. So I'm actually thinking, all right, maybe I'll see something while I drive. But I was skeptical. really skeptical.
Yeah. Right, yeah.
We'll see. And then
We'll
the next
see.
thing I know, like I'm behind a school bus, which is going to make 100 stops, right? So I know I'm going to be late. And I'm grumbling, and the bus stops, and this kid comes down. He's wearing a hoodie. It's like 12 degrees, and he's wearing a hoodie, right? Comes down the steps, and this huge dog has been sitting at the top of the driveway. And the moment he comes down from the steps, this dog comes barreling down the driveway and jumps into his arms. And you can just see this kid's face light up. And my eyes filled with tears. And I thought, like, there it is. There's that 15 seconds. It doesn't mean that my kid is better. It doesn't mean that my work is easier, but it means that in those 15 seconds, and I'm getting goosebumps just remembering it, I tuned into something else, right? It's the and, right? The world is difficult and it's beautiful. It's messy and it's wonderful. Yeah. And I think holding those together, that's what awe does for me. That's what wonder does for me. It allows me to hold both at the same time and not minimize one or the other. It's that there can always be a beautiful sunset, even on the hardest day.
Oh, that's so beautifully said.
I love the idea of awe journaling. Some people have like 5 different journals. What do you do, Deborah? Do you have one dedicated to these moments?
Yeah, I do it on computer. I type. And so I literally have like day 165, day 166. Some days it's a sentence, some days it's a picture, some days it's a short story. I do have tons of little journals. I'm kind of compulsive about buying them. So sometimes I'll jot it in a journal, but then I'll transcribe it over to a document because I know the cloud will last longer in some ways. I will lose my journals. But I also find that I share them with people. Like I will send it to my mom. I'll send it to a friend. I often will send it to my 14-year-old, right? And that has been a really fun way to connect with my teenager because it's like, oh my gosh, this is a cool picture I took, or this story, right? It's short. It's not preachy, as you mentioned with my dad, because it's just sharing. And then very frequently, because we do this, she'll share stuff back. Like she'll share a picture that she found that was cool. And so that gives me a window a little bit into what's bringing her wonder. Yeah. So I don't have to sit down and say, mother's wonder moment of today is, right? When no teenager wants to hear that. Yeah. But I almost feel like when you share it as amplified. As I share in the book, I have one of my dearest friends from high school whose young daughter had leukemia for a second time. And to complicate matters, she has some medical fragility because of Down syndrome. And she lives in Wisconsin and I live in Boston. And so I just felt super helpless. And so I finally said, I'm going to send you one beautiful thing a day and you don't need to respond, right? I'm going to share something beautiful every day. And that's gift. What I do. And gift. Sometimes she'd respond, sometimes she'd heart, sometimes it'd be nothing. But it was this way of just being a constant. Because sometimes you don't know what to say when somebody's going through something difficult. And I just wanted to be on the lookout. And it also got me thinking about her. So every day I was thinking, what am I going to send to her today? And that also opened me up to look for things.
I'm Marcus Smith for Constant Wonder, joined by Lisa Valentine Clark of The Lisa Show, another podcast from BYU Radio. We're visiting with Deborah Farmer Kris, author of Raising Awe Seekers, How the Science of Wonder Helps Our Kids Thrive. We start every Constant Wonder episode saying that, there's nature and history and art and the music and the beauty, and then there's human striving and human kindness. There's something in your book about a friend of yours and the Tiny Kindnesses Project. And Deborah, if you would comment on this, because I'm so interested in the idea of conveying to everybody I meet that this is not rare experience. This is accessible every day.
One of the things I found most hopeful about the research on awe is that when people kept awe journals or people they interviewed, like what's something that gave you goosebumps, made you feel wow? The most common source actually wasn't nature, even though I think that's what comes most. It was human goodness. It was moral virtue. It was people being kind and brave. And I think it was both surprising and unsurprising to me because while it's not the first thing that jumps to mind, how many of us have had those driveway moments where we're, say, listening to end story of something beautiful and you have to stop and listen and you feel that. And so these moments of connection, these little moments in community, these moments of noticing a neighbor being kind with so much negativity in the news, it's very easy to really be down on humanity. And I truly, I'm an optimist. I really believe most people are very good because I meet a lot of people. I talk to a lot of people. And at their core, most people just want to be good people. And that doesn't make headlines. And so one of my friends started something called the Tiny Kindness Project. Her brother had passed away, and she was looking actively for small moments of intentional kindness. So not random acts of kindness, but what's a small thing that somebody's done for you that felt big for you? I actually sent in one of the very first entries. I had a dear friend. She kept asking me to go out for dinner, and I kept putting her off. I was teaching, early years of teaching, but I was also helping a family member with some mental health crises, and life was just really, really busy and overwhelming. Some friends would just give up on you. They're like, I've asked Deborah for 6 months to go out for dinner. She clearly doesn't have time for me. But instead, one day, there was a knock on the door, and no one was there, and it was 5 paper bags, and it was labeled Deborah's Lunch Monday, Deborah's Lunch Tuesday, Deborah's Lunch Wednesday. And, Charlene was a really great cook. So for a week, rather than having microwave ramen or Stouffer's, I had these meals. And it was just this moment of saying, she was saying, my friendship's still here. I recognize things are difficult. And,
wow.
Those are things that stick, right? Those are things that then make me want to think, when somebody is struggling, what can I do? What's the practical thing I can do? And I feel like that source of wonder, that's what transforms communities. Because when we see it, we want to do it. It's contagious. And so one of the things I like about the awe research, they find that experiencing awe actually does make you want to be generous in response. That's one of the outcomes. And I get it, because when somebody does that to you and you see it, you want to respond in kind.
It changes you. Yeah.
There came a time for you when you started being very reflective about awe and started researching scientific literature about it. You got to know about the work at Berkeley, begun by Dacher Keltner and Jonathan Haidt, studying awe. The thing that struck me most was not that you got acquainted with it, but that just becoming acquainted with the fact that there was a science about awe gave you awe. I mean, it kind of doubled up on itself, and you got goosebumps just to discover that people cared about.
No, it's totally true. And I think part of it was the timing. It was actually during COVID that I discovered this research. So I did teaching for a long time, and then I moved more into parent education. And so one of my claims to fame, I wrote one of the first viral articles about how to talk to kids about COVID. It came out on March 12th, right? A couple days before everything shut down. I was giving all of these kind of Zoom talks on stress and resilience and preparing your kids for a different kind of school year. And it was fall of 2021, and a school reached out and wanted me to give a talk like that. And I really think something inside me just kind of broke. And I thought, I'm gritted out. Yes, resilience is so important. I will never not talk about that as a psychological strength. But that's not all there is to life, right? You don't want to just push through and keep pushing through. And so I stumbled upon this white paper, this 45 pages that was summarized the research that had been done. And I was actually sitting at this desk. The light was coming in. I got goosebumps. I texted it out to some friends. And I was like, I need to write an article about this. So I pitched it to the Washington Post, and the editor got back very quickly and said, this is a cool idea. And so then I reached out to Dr. Keltner, and when I interviewed him, he was taking a walk along the beach. I was like, I love you. And I wrote this piece, and I got so excited, and it spread, right? And I think there was a hunger for it. I think the year before, Adam Grant had coined the word of the year as languishing. And I was like, so the antidote to languishing for me is awe and wonder. And at that point, I realized I wasn't done with it. Because I think, as you brought up with my dad and everything else, I've been tapping into this my whole life, right? This was something that motivates me. It had been a mental wellness tool I had been using my whole life, to look for things, but I didn't really name it as an emotion. I was like, this feels good, but to suddenly realize happy, sad, mad, scared, yes. Also, awe is an emotion, and it's not one we talk about enough. And given the research behind it, it's not something to ignore.
We don't talk about it enough. When I think about how many times somebody tells a great story about what they've experienced, they finish their story by saying, and I was filled with awe and wonder, period. And they don't go on. I want them to tell me more about what the quality was of that emotion.
I think a lot of times they use different emotions to describe it. I think people use different synonyms. I was surprised, I was overcome, I was inspired. Have you found that to be the situation? And do you ever make that kind of connection with people of the different emotions and even just the semantics of it?
I think that awe-inspiring is a phrase we will use, right? Like that was an awe-inspiring moment.
Sure.
I think sometimes people conflate awe and gratitude. And I do like to make a distinction there because they are both powerful emotions and they are both emotions that have health benefits to them, right? But gratitude actually, I feel like sometimes has a little bit more of a cognitive load. Sometimes I think about my day and be like, what am I grateful for? And I'm naming it where awe is involuntary, right? I will go outside and I will see something or I'll hear a story. I'll hear you talk about my dad and it just comes. And so and then I can think about it and talk about it. And that's why I call the book Raising Awe Seekers, because you can't force a child or yourself to feel anything. You just can't.
No, you can't.
I know, but I've tried. Put us in the pathway to provide opportunities if we know where awe is found, or maybe it will be. Like maybe no, maybe yes, but it might happen.
I think this is the very arena in which someone like Lisa with her Council of Moms and her show specializes in pulling us into those pathways, those opportunities. You never talk about parenting very much, do you, Lisa?
Yeah, never. I don't swim in it. Yeah. And especially I'm not very reflective of it now that my children are mostly grown and examine all of my decisions and relationships like over and over and over again as my youngest is entering her senior year.
Oh my goodness, that is a milestone.
Right?
I'm a dad, but I don't have a little podcast council of dads. But the thing about Deborah's work is, I think, so crucial for parents to get their minds and hearts wrapped around.
100%. I think when you're talking about how it's different than gratitude, and we do use the phrase childlike wonder. And I feel like as a mom, a lot of the times I was and I still feel this way, very protective of childhood. I feel like we live in a society that values just sort of the superficial elements of childhood, the fun and the nonstop and the lack of responsibility. And we oftentimes forget about that curiosity and wonder and shared experiences of childhood that lays a foundation for what kind of adult they think is possible to be. I'm so curious about those kinds of experiences that you had. First of all, like with the way that you describe your father, with the way that you were raised, I am curious if there was a moment in time or an experience where you thought, this is the thing, this idea, this is something that I'm going to follow for the rest of my life, this awe and wonder. Was there a kind of moment like that for you?
I think as I was writing the book, that forced me to dive into the practice even more myself of saying, what brings me awe and wonder? Like, what's lighting my kids up? And I noticed that subtly it began to change my relationship with my neighborhood. I started going on awe walks and I got to notice little things more. My relationship with winter was slightly less fraught. I began to notice that my social media feeds were changing because it was less news, makeup, and more earth art and birds, lots of birds. And it got me thinking, am I connected to my community in the ways I want to be? Are my kids connected to community? And if they're not, how can I think outside the box of helping them and other kids plug into community? So I think it just got me asking these reflective questions. And all of these reflective questions brought me back toward, not to sound cliche, but what I really feel like matters in life. And for me, when I look at what matters most, I want my kids to be kind. And I do want them to find kind of joy and beauty in this world. I want them to fall in love with this world, the people, the beauty. There's so much here. And I feel like it's not much of a life if we're just drudging through it. And so that doesn't mean they're not going to face all the difficult times we all do. I think that Mary Oliver poem, what are you going to do with your one wild and precious life? And I think it is the idea of a precious life.
Yeah.
Like, this is a really precious world. The people around us are precious people. And this is the thing about wonder is it doesn't have to be the Grand Canyon. Like, just as often, it's that really beautiful flower you didn't notice was blooming. It's the neighbor who, when you're sick, brought in your trash barrels for you. And those are the things that ground us back in what's real. And as we're more and more online, awe just grounds us back to our senses, grounds us back to what matters most. I've really spent the last 3 years steeped in this. And again, I feel like I have a lifetime of experiences.
Okay.
But in practicing it and writing about it and talking to people, everyone wants to share their awe stories, which is so fun. Like, I'll have my neighbor stop me, right? And he was said about something in the news, and he said, I was so disheartened, and then I drove home, and I saw this flock of geese go overhead. Those geese don't know what's happening in the world, and they're flying straight, and they're off to do their thing. And so I get these stories now, but it cumulatively has shown me that I'm tapping into something that matters for me and my kids, and that seems to be resonating more broadly, and I could not be more thrilled.
I'm Marcus Smith for Constant Wonder, joined by Lisa Valentine Clark of The Lisa Show, another podcast from BYU Radio. We're visiting with Deborah Farmer Kris, author of Raising Awe Seekers, How the Science of Wonder Helps Our Kids Thrive. I've long known how being too busy and overprogrammed can derail us from wonder, blocking out opportunities for awe. As our conversation with Deborah continues, she and Lisa each share more of their experiences of slowing down with members of their family to share and celebrate experiences of wonder that nourish us and help us all thrive.
I love that you're a proponent for this. And I think a lot of parents can relate to that feeling of there's so much of the busyness of being a parent. And it's easy to get caught up in that of, I need to teach them this, and we got to go to school and soccer practice. And I remember when my oldest was about 18 months and still just kind of a toddler. And I was busy bringing in some groceries and in a hurry to get into our apartment and trying to usher him along as I'm carrying a bunch of things. And there was a gust of wind. I saw him just ahead of me, and it almost overtook him, but it didn't. And it was enough just to thrill him. And he looked at me, and I looked at him, and he looked at me as if to say, did you see that? What was that? That was thrilling because that wind just covered him from toe to head. And he kind of laughed a little bit. I mean, I'm getting emotional just thinking about it because I remember thinking, oh, he's never experienced this before. This gust of wind as I'm just trying to carry the groceries in and there's wind and I'm like, oh, we got to get going to A and to B. That shared moment with my son is something that I'll remember the rest of my life as a pure moment of that sense of awe. And I wonder if you have a story like that, of something that you've shared with one of your children, and how you think that changes your connection to other people, especially children.
Like I have so many of those moments, which is awesome in itself, right? So I don't live that far from New York City, but my 11-year-old had never been. And so we got on a train, we went down for just 48 hours. It was kind of a yes weekend for him, right? So it was like M&M store and Harry Potter, but also, Times Square. But the moment where I really saw eyes filled with wonder is we were on 6th Avenue. It was the mornings, and so there weren't that many people up yet. It was like 8 o'clock on a Sunday. and this flock of pigeons, must have been hundreds of them, swirl in the swirl, going up and around. And I know that a lot of people would say those are pests, but I saw those eyes, and it was just, this is glorious. I've never seen anything like this before. And I think I try to think of my one wild and precious childhood, right? Can't make everything magical. Like, there's routine and there's homework and there's everything else. And there shouldn't be.
And there's a lot of pressure for that. You only have 18 summers. You have to go to Disneyland every summer.
I'm not
that
into
kind of pressure. I'd love to know your perspective on that.
Amazing experiences all the time. In fact, one of the professors I talked to, one of the pieces of advice he gave me was, if you do take a family trip, don't overprogram it. Wander in a neighborhood you've never wandered before. We went to California for the very first time a year ago, and I didn't take his advice. I planned it. I was like, we're going to have magic. We're going to do all these things. So we got to this aquarium, and it was packed, and I have one child who just does not do crowds well. And so we left, and we just started wandering, and suddenly we take a turn, and there's a beach. This is in San Diego, and there are sea lions everywhere. And we just spent 2 hours with the kids naming the sea lions, taking up stories about the sea lions, taking pictures of the sea lions. Did we do a day at Disneyland? We did. That is not what they remember the most, right? I think that's really important as parents to remember. If I think about what brings me awe and wonder, reading to my kids at night, a car ride where we're roll down the windows and we're playing music and having fun in that way. My 14-year-old, she likes to make bucket lists for summer. And they're not big things. One of them was, I want to cut a watermelon in half and eat it like a bowl. That was an item on our list. I was like, I can make that happen. I can make that happen. And I love how small it was, right? And so we opened it, we sat on the deck, and one child had one half, one child had the other half, and they scooped it out. And I thought, we put pressure on ourselves as parents to make things magical when we forget that sometimes the magical evening is the watermelon that you're eating out of a bowl, or it's just looking up at the stars.
This is a world that loves sensation. This is a world that loves epic drama. Everything's over the top. And how do we...
And listen, I'm all here for drama too, but I like your and, the and.
There's a kind of a paradox I see here, and it has to do with the fact that maybe one of the things most central to our lives might be found in the small, negligible, overlooked opportunities of seeing the leaf blow down the street.
You might have your introvert who just sees it all. But we live in a very go, go, go world. And we live in a very screens-oriented world. And slowing down is tough, right? People are very busy. And so I give no really prescriptive parenting advice. I think there are thousands of ways to be a great parent. And I think your kids came to you for a reason. So, if you are loud, you are loud. If you're quiet, you are quiet. And you don't have to be something you're not, right? And they're going to stretch you and you're going to grow together. My best piece of advice is that they watch us. They're great anthropologists of human behavior, and we are their case study. They're looking at us, and they're noticing, right? And I'm not saying we do not have to be paragons of virtue, but they may notice your bad habits, but they can also notice your good ones. And I am okay with my kids thinking I'm goofy. I'm okay with them being like, okay, Mom's pulling us out to see a sunset again. And there was this...
Isn't that the
because
sweetest,
I this moment, I was driving my daughter to an art class with her friend, and it was springtime in Boston, and it's just beautiful. And so I kept pointing out magnolia trees that were blooming. And my daughter turned to her friend and said, my mom really gets excited about trees and birds. But she had no embarrassment in her voice. I love that you actually can share that with a friend. And it doesn't mean that she's going to be super into birds, but I think that sometimes we want to do so much for our kids and support them. We almost forget to support our own interests. And, I picked up boxing this year, and my kids make fun of me, but there are boxing gloves in the car, and I go to my boxing classes, and I love it. And they know that Mom is doing something for her that brings her joy. Yes. And that's important. Part of it is feeding yourself. What makes you light up? Because if you're not lighting up yourself, it's really hard to be there for your kids and their needs.
Oh, I love that you brought that up. I feel very passionately about that. It's interesting as you were talking about that your kids know what you like. My mother, she'll kill me for saying this. Don't tell her I told you. She will cry when she talks about how much her mother loved a sunset, and that every time she sees a beautiful sunset, she thinks of her mother. And to me, there's something so beautiful and pure and truthful about that. And you're absolutely right. You are showing your kids who you are and how you want to be remembered in what you choose, what you talk about, what you think about, what you draw attention to. And I've got my nerdy things and my kids know it. I take pictures of trees all the time. I'm like, look at this tree. And they're like, okay, settle down. Or I love doing improvisation, which is just like goofy games. I know it's nerdy, but my kids know that it is exciting for me. And there's so many different ways to be a good mom, to be a good person in society. And this idea of just liking what everybody else likes because it's all over social media. We are all kind of looking the same and dressing the same. And kicking against that is actually an invitation to finding your creative pursuit, what fills you up. It's interesting to see the joy that I feel in watching my kids
I really do feel like watching my kids find what makes them tick and then find a new thing.
Yes.
Like that to me is one of the most exciting things. And I think that's where my dad tapped into the good stuff, right? I think that where many things did not come intuitively necessarily, that did. Oh my gosh, my kids are cool people. And what makes them cool is not their grades, and it's not what college they go to. It's all these other things that make them tick. And, for anybody out there who's like the mom of a middle schooler, it's very easy to get scared because they're changing their personality and their style and their interests and their friends 16 times between 6th and 8th grade. And then I hear from the parents, what happened to my little girl, like da-da-da.
Why are they experimenting with eyeliner so much?
And if it can just be like, I'm curious. Who are you today? This is so
I'm trying
cool. You
things
want to
out.
repaint your room? Okay, let's go to Home Depot. And then 3 months later, you want to get some vines from Michael's? We can do that.
It's like you're living my exact life. I relate to everything that you just said. I feel like we're looking for a way to connect. And this idea of connecting with these awe-inspiring moments, because it's not just led by us, but it's this shared collaborative experience of showing what brings you awe and wonder. And it's such a vulnerable exchange, but it really strengthens that relationship in a way that few other things really
I think there's
can.
also that if you're feeling depleted, you're listening out there and you're like, I'm not tapping into this at all. This is where you just start
I don't know how to do
say,
this.
What is a song or a movie where I know I'm going to have that feeling? Just tapping in. I remember this moment a couple of years ago when I realized I'm not sure what music I like anymore. I had the music I liked, and then it was like kids' music, and then it was like I went back to the old music, but it didn't fit me anymore. And I was actually depressed about it for a little while. And then I turned to my daughter. She taught me how to use Spotify. I didn't know how to use it. And it was almost like this experiment process that she helped guide me through of, what do you like, Mom? That's cool.
And having them help you with that.
Right, exactly.
There's something really beautiful about that when you need help and your kids are instructing you how to find something that you're looking for.
When they're saying, hey, Mom, go for a walk, you'll feel better.
Yeah.
I was trying to put this together, kind of calibrating how important awe-seeking really is for you. And I thought, well, sometimes people look at life as a smorgasbord and you just go and there's a buffet and you eat different stuff. Or maybe you go to a bookstore and you got the shelf over here for sports, extreme sports, and over here is the shelf for, macrame. And then Lisa's producer, Becca, piped up and said, or maybe awe is the name of the bookstore. And I'm just wondering if that somehow triggers any thoughts for you. Is awe and wonder in some way pivotal? And maybe the question is just for you.
My book is divided up by the sources of awe and then talking about it for kids. But when I look at those sources, they encompass so many things that really are just essential to humanity. So nature, art, music, belonging, big ideas, the life of the mind, the lifespan. It's like, it's beginnings and endings, and then human goodness. And if I really think about it, if you have even 4 of these in your life on a consistent basis, that's a pretty good life. And I think, we're more alike as humans than we want to think. So maybe these are sections of the bookstore, and maybe somebody's looking at embroidery and somebody else is looking at ceramics and somebody else is looking at manga and comic books, and that's great. These sections are all things that just tap us into that kind of core of being human.
I love that you talk about the core of what it is to be human. Sometimes I think, especially as parents, we unintentionally put a list and a heaviness to us as parents of, we need to do all these things. Give me the hack. Then give me, so then so A's important too. So now how do I do this? And it creates this kind of frenzy in us as parents. And so if you'll indulge me, I have just one story before I ask you my final question. I used to host a TV show called Random Acts of Kindness. And I found tiny kindnesses during a really intense time of my life where I didn't know that's exactly what I've needed. And so that idea that gratitude is closely related to awe, but separate from, is something that I've come to learn. And I think most notably in watching my late husband slowly deteriorate from a disease, just having to be forced to slow down, and the moments that we were able to share of, look at that bird, look at this plant, listen to this piece of music, read this poem, that became the entire focus of his life and what connected us. And there's this moment of when life sort of gets back to normal, meaning the busyness, and then you get caught in what society teaches you of what a good life is. There's this disconnect. It's almost like you need to recommit yourself to a different way of living. It's not a hack. It's not a novel idea, this idea of living with awe and wonder. It's a change in how you do it. So it's kind of a big question, but this idea of awe as a mode of existence versus just this thing to do or to add. What is your final perspective on why this is so essential to living the good life or living a good life?
I think that in order to feel it, there's a kind of a symbiotic relationship with our senses. What we can see, what we can hear, what we can touch, smell. And I think almost everybody would say at some point, I wish I could slow down. Like, things are going so fast, things are so busy. And there is the meditation practices, which I will never say bad things about, but I'm actually not good at meditating. But what I have found is trying to just put on awe as kind of prescription glasses. It's not that it's an extra thing I'm doing. It's just maybe I can see the world a little more clearly because I'm looking up a little bit more. I'm pausing to listen to the bird sound or listen to what my kid is chatting about in the back seat. This is what slows it down. And I also think that when we talk about the good life and the pressure with kids, I think so often parents say, I want my kids to be happy. And happiness, like awe and anger and everything, it's an emotion and it comes and it goes, right? You can have a baseline, like I'm a fairly content person or optimistic, but you're not necessarily going to feel happy all the time. Your kids are going to feel down. They're going to feel lonely. They're going to feel frustrated. And the thing I love about awe is that for me, it's almost the ultimate and, right? I am frustrated and the peeper frogs came out heralding this spring. I am frustrated and somebody sent me a really nice text. When I think about what I want for my kids, I don't want them to have a life with zero struggle because they won't, number one. But I want them to know that we can all tap into this as a way to feel connected to ourselves and the world when things feel a little out of control. There are gifts everywhere. You can go outside on your worst day and you can see the kid coming off the bus and having the dog tackle them. It becomes a habit over time to put on those glasses. You can start small, but it's a way of seeing that is worth pursuing.
Yes.
Deborah, thank you so much for your time and for being with us today.
Thank you.
Just a delight to have you.
This was so unexpectedly wonderful.
All the best to you.
This was such a great conversation.
Thank you so much.
Deborah Farmer Kris, her book is titled Raising Awe Seekers, How the Science of Wonder Helps Our Kids Thrive. This episode was produced by Jess Scoville with assistance from Lily Jensen. Special thanks to Lisa Valentine Clark and to the production team of The Lisa Show, including Erica Price and Becca Hurley. I'm Marcus Smith. The Constant Wonder Podcast is a production of BYU Radio.